Hello, welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shanebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about cultivating divine innocence.
Yeah, it's a cool name for the topic we came up with last night. And I think I guess I think one of the things that we really want to start to talk about today is judgment and how to sort of step away from some of our more judgmental natures, I guess, that we have. And that this is sort of a precursor to the course that we're going to be doing for Patreons in about 2 weeks.
Next week, 1 week.
Oh, next week. So 1 week.
Yep.
This episode is Stream of Truth, and then the next one that we do are both sort of going to lead into the topic for the course, and then we'll offer the course to Patreons next week. But these two videos, I guess, or streams, we plan on having them be sort of initial steps towards the course.
Yes. And just real quickly, the course, I think we're going to call it the Namaste Method, the universal communication tool. And it's just this really powerful set of practices to really have the most amazing communication with other people or between institutions or even between countries. So it's a really, we think, pretty transcendental set of practices for communication. And yeah, today we're going to talk about a bit about judgment.
Yeah.
And I just want to pause and say, last night you shared this phrase, divine innocence, and something in me just pinged so powerfully, something about that phrase and the meanings I'm taking from it, just so beautiful, so beautiful. So I'm really excited about this topic.
Yeah, it's awesome. I had never used that phrase or really heard that phrase from anyone. I'm not really sure where it came from, but like you, I had the same ping with it. Like, this just feels very profound somehow.
Yes, like almost like here is a key.
Yeah.
Here is a key to our ascension and our peace and our joy right here.
Yeah. And I think so. I haven't put too much thought into exactly how we're going to lay out this video. And I don't think either of us really have. But where do you think maybe we should start?
We had 5 points in the description that we talked about.
Okay.
So maybe we could go through those, and then I have some additional points. I'm sure you will too.
Sure.
So if we want, we could start off with this practice of letting go of judgment towards self and others, and also our life situations.
Right. Yeah.
Letting go of judgment about everything. Our bodies, we should say too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can the mind can like resist a little bit of this, because the mind can sort of be like, well, if I don't judge myself, especially when it's related to ourselves.
Yes.
If I don't judge myself as not doing something quite correctly, then I'll never improve it. Right. I'll never do any better, or I won't notice the flaw in my expressions and stuff like that. And I don't find that to be the case. I don't find, like, it's in our nature to improve. The only real difference is sort of the story we're putting around the improvement. Like, we're improving because we were not good enough before, and now if we change that, then we'll be good enough. But really, we're improving because we see opportunity to do things better next time. It's not that last time we did it so bad, or we were worse people, or things like that. We're just seeing an opportunity to do better. So we still see those opportunities. We're not blind to these things. We're still just very aware of everything. We're just not doing all the negative self-talk around it, that like chastising and, blaming and punishing and all that, right?
I love that. Yes. It's like we don't have to be a harsh master to ourselves. We can come from more a benevolent, loving, motherly energy, whatever resonates with you. But yes, we don't have to be harsh with ourselves. And this idea that I'm perfect now, as is everyone else, as is every situation right now. And then if I choose to expand in some way, I'm perfect then too, but I'm not perfect now. And I'll never forget a shaman that I did some work with a couple of years ago. I was still using the word healing a lot. Oh, I'm healing. Clients that I work with, they're healing. And she noticed my use of the word healing, and she started to talk more about the word expansion. And this is, I think, what we're talking about, that healing has a connotation of something is wrong, something is broken, something is injured, something needs to be fixed, something's not quite right. So I really like that distinction as well. So I always use the word now expansion. I'm just expanding. But there's nothing wrong with me now.
Expansion too is our natural thing. That's what we do.
This is what the universe is doing, right?
Right. The universe does this. We do this.
Yeah. And through us, the universe, the consciousness is expanding. Yeah.
All of nature does this.
Yes.
Right.
It's really just, yeah, exactly.
So we can't really fight this nature that we have to expand. We will learn and expand almost regardless of what we do.
Exactly.
And in that knowing that you do that, you basically can just trust that you will notice when there are things you can do a little better than last time. You'll see them because you're not, you're actually less likely to notice things in such a clarity when you're absorbed in negative stories of judgment. Like you're actually you're a little bit more, I don't know, like you're not seeing the full thing.
You're more aligned. Yeah. You're more tuned in. You're at a higher vibration. The channel is open.
And you'll be more effective at embracing the more positive aspects or doing things a little differently because you are not resisting yourself as well. So you're not pushing against yourself in any way or chastising yourself. You're like sort of your own partner with your own expansion, and there's no resistance. So you end up actually improving faster, in my experience anyway.
Yes. And we can always just go back to our internal guidance system with all of this, that if I'm feeling judgment towards myself, negative self-talk, likely that's not going to feel good. And that's our sign that we're a bit off track. We're not quite aligned. When we don't feel good, there's something, we're in some type of illusion, in some type of story. So we just, and then if we have positive self-talk, well, I'm okay now, and I'm okay if I expand too, that feels better. So we always know when we're aligned and on track just by how it feels internally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't mean, definitely don't deny what you honestly experienced or what you honestly did. You may have did things that you do determine were not highest and best. Like you may have reacted poorly, got aggressive, or who knows. Totally, these things happen, but they weren't mistakes. That's one of the things we want to let go of. In order for you to see that behavior in you or see that energy come out of you, like this event transpired so you can see that. If it never happened, you wouldn't have seen this capacity within you, and you wouldn't be able to then adjust and to try and do things better. So
absolutely. And thank you for bringing some clarity to what I was saying, because if I know sometimes if I act in a way that I realize later I could do it in a more highest and best way, I will have some uncomfortable feelings come up, some pain about my
guilt,
action.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's really necessary and helpful. So there's kind of a difference, like what is naturally arising, we want to always honor. But if on top of that, from say our thinking mind, we're adding like negative self-talk, maybe that's what we can loosen up. But whatever is naturally arising, of course, we honor.
Yeah. Basically, I think what we're noticing is, oh, that behavior I did doesn't align with my true nature, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't align with my loving true self.
Yes.
And so it feels bad because, that isn't who I am really, right?
Yes.
So that we notice that, and we just notice it, and it's not a bad thing. We notice it to go, oh, so now I know how to correct, because now I can notice this behavior and be like, oh, okay, that's not aligned, but what is aligned? And then try to move towards that, right?
Exactly. And in this process, we can aim to hold both orientations simultaneously as we're going through it. We can feel maybe guilt, dislike for the way we acted, and then we can also be kind to ourselves. We can also come from our God self and give ourselves grace and not engage in a ton of negative self-talk about it. We can feel the feelings and also comfort ourselves and encourage ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, a really easy way to step into that God self narrative internally is to just say, well, what would God say to me about this? Right?
Exactly.
God's not going to judge you or be like, look at how terrible you are.
Exactly.
Like God's more like a consistently, divinely optimistic, loving parent.
Absolutely.
Who's supporting you, and only, like, even in your deepest failures is still there holding their hand out for you and saying, you did your best and maybe we can do better next time, but it's okay, let's just look forward and continue moving. So
absolutely. And we all have this invitation to embody our God self. We are God, God is us. So can we, in those moments of maybe deepest despair over maybe something we did, can we still embody our God self to ourselves? Can we still give ourselves that unconditional love and lack of judgment? Discernment over, I'm not so comfortable with what I did and I want to shift it. So there's discernment, there's learning, but there's not chastising, reprimanding, insulting of oneself.
Yeah. Awesome. What else do we have on the?
Okay. So that was number one. The second point we had is resting in the I don't know mind.
Yes. Okay. So I just want to share that Aaron, so I've talked on the stream and I've said to Tassel a lot that I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. And Aaron Abke brought this up in a recent video. I don't know if he mentioned it before this or what, but in a video he made, he said that the I don't know mind is the enlightened mind. It's this state of knowing that truth is beyond the conceptualization of the mind. Like the mind can't know truth because truth is an infinitely, truth is just beyond mind. Mind's finite and truth is infinite. And so we sort of pretend we know what's going on, and it helps us feel comfortable, right? Basically to think we know what's happening. But basically, we don't know the divine will. Like, we have no real concept of what the divine plan is ahead of us. We get maybe little glimpses of things, right? We don't know what our plan is. We don't know what the divine is sort of working through us, and all the infinite, like, little complexities of our life with all the other relationships. We just don't know what's going on. And to just basically embrace that and be like, I literally don't know what's happening. It allows us the space to just be a student, right? To like, just accept that the whole place is a mystery. Everything this other person's doing is a mystery. I can't know their experience. I barely know my own experience, let alone theirs. So in that is just sort of the fundamental truth of the duality sort of illusion that we're in. We're just not able to see. Even the enlightened masters that reach the highest states of consciousness in the human body are not seeing the divine plan in a pure sense. They're not able to either. What's really happened is more of a radical acceptance of what is, and then with that comes a purity of peace and an expression of love, the divine love. And so that's sort of the epitome of the choice in this density of love or fear. And so really that's all we're ever doing, is choosing how we're going to actually respond and what energy we're going to embody. And that's about as far as our understanding goes, as far as what's actually occurring. Everything else is more or less just stories we make up.
I love this, everything you said so much. It's so juicy to me. I love it so much. I want to share that you've been saying this a lot over the past, I would say 2 months, maybe. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. And at times I think I got triggered, because partly I think I was reading into that, like, you don't know about our relationship, or you don't know maybe how you feel about me, or not maybe that, but it was a little triggering to me. I was like, what do you mean you don't know?
Yeah, most people, when I say I don't know what's going on, most people sort of laugh because they think I'm kidding, or they think that I'm just being silly or something. Or like you said, it can feel hurtful as well, because
like, what do you mean you don't know about everything? Like, what about us and our work and our plans?
I should say that is one thing that we can know to a degree, is our own feelings.
Yes.
Right. We can know those as what they are, what we experience, but we're also veiled from a lot of our own energies that are coming in. So so we don't even fully know our own experience. And so it can sound like I'm saying I don't know why I'm with you, or I don't know
I don't know what we're doing, or it was a bit triggering for me. And
I can imagine. I didn't you didn't mention that though, I don't think.
No,
until just now.
I never brought it up.
Well, I'm sorry for that. I didn't realize.
No, there's no need to apologize, because at the same time, what I also want to share is I believe I have also been in the I don't know mind, but not fully realizing I have been, and it's been so uncomfortable. So I think I've been in it too, but didn't even really know I was in it, and hadn't quite gotten even accustomed to being in it. I was used to being in my thinking egoic mind, which thought it knew the plan for my life and what was going on. And what I realized is, over the past few months, some of my feelings of like ungroundedness or what is going on is because I think I've been letting go of that thinking mind and entering more into this I don't know mind. And I haven't quite integrated it enough, or felt comfortable with it enough. And what I realize is, I talk a lot about, I've had to let go of my childhood dream of being married and probably having like a very secure career, more mainstream career, and all of that. And I realized in this moment that just so much of that was because I wanted to be in the I know mind. I did not want to be in the I don't know mind. Yeah. Because the I don't know mind can, especially I think in the beginning, feel really, what's going on? I don't know what's happening tomorrow. I don't know where my life is leading me. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. You start to realize that, the plans that I make.
Are that they're irrelevant.
They're just stuff that I'm writing down. Really, or
not that I think we have our heartfelt desires and the essence of those desires. And I feel those are our path. I feel those will come into us, but in the form, the specific forms are unknown.
That's what I mean by plan, is when we sort of go, oh, okay, I can understand how this can come about, and here are the steps, and then we start to plan for it, and then as we all know, life then happens, and either the plans sometimes do occur the way we expect, and other times they don't, and I think the point that we're saying is that you just never know. You never are going to know, and there's a comfort that we feel when we do the planning, and when we do all the rational thought around the best ways to achieve things that we're feeling an essence of desire around. And so we can feel very comfortable. Eventually what happens, at least in my experience, is the more like our consciousness expands, and the more mysteries we start to observe, and then paradoxes we solve, we start to realize that there's no end to this mystery. That no matter how much I solve, I still don't really know anything. And that's uncomfortable, because, we feel, in order to be secure and safe, that we have to know the threats as well. Like, what threatens me, what opposes me, in order for us to let go of that. We have to learn how to feel comfortable being like, there could be threats that come towards me, but the threats themselves are also perfect, and so there's nothing to be scared of. And so you have to sort of apply that like divine perfection understanding to the realization that I don't know, and then your faith is what helps you feel safe. So you feel safe through your faith, not through your plans. And so you have to shift like where the safety comes from.
Oh my gosh. I feel that is a drop the mic statement that you just said.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience, and I think it's probably a pretty typical one. The safety, it won't be found in the planning and in the rationality, because that is, it's useful for us to do that stuff, and useful to make plans in different ways. It informs our living in many ways, but it doesn't help us feel safe. Well, it does help us feel safe until we start to see through it all. And that point, whether we like it or not, we stop feeling so safe despite our planning. And that's when we have to return to faith, because we'll get, without faith, we'll just continue. We may go way overboard and start to like, oh, well, I just got to plan more. I got to plan further in advance, or I got to take preventative measures and be more, whatever.
I love it so much. And I'm just thinking, even in my own life experience of being married, and there was a part of me that wanted to stay married because it felt safe. It was like financially secure. It was, in a way, emotionally secure. I didn't have to do anything drastic. I could continue to live with my kids. There was a security to it. And I think it's really easy to stay in a relationship or to stay in a job because of a perception of security.
Right.
And as you said, when I did finally have the courage to leave the marriage, where could I go?
Yeah.
I had to go within. I had to go into my own faith about my life. So it's interesting that I think a lot of things in our society are set up to give us the illusion or the perception of security and safety.
Yep.
Like, having a job and sort of an assumption that it'll be long term, or getting married.
Right.
Even in the vows, till death do us part, as if we could, predict that ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think the human understandably really seeks security, seeks certainty. What will happen tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And I just love how you framed it, that the security, the safety comes from our faith.
Yes.
In the divine plan, in the plan that our soul has for us.
While we believe in the illusion of security, mm-hmm. the security does come from that, but it's false. Eventually, we see past it.
And at any moment, something could happen to your job. You could be fired.
Eventually, that foundation. This is exactly what happened to me. Just to share my experience of it. You mentioned the marriage. I felt that to be secure financially, I needed to have a particular, or a job, like a 9-to-5 type, just a job where it was a stable thing. And, to a degree that is somewhat true. It does provide a stability, but there isn't the safety that I thought was there, right? Like, I was let go for no reason at all. And, they can do that. People sort of think that they get the job and then they do the job and they do well, and that guarantees that this job will exist for them always, that they're safe. But that's just not the case. No. And eventually what happens is these things will blow up in our face. And the thing that we thought was keeping us feeling safe will just disintegrate in front of our eyes. And then we'll go, well, how do I possibly feel safe then if these plans and these ideas around my safety aren't real, right? Like, if I was thinking it about work and I was doing that with work, I'm probably doing this with other things too. And you sort of realize, either slowly or in one giant moment, that you've been building your whole life like this around your safety and security, that none of that is actually guaranteed, and that's like an illusion. So then you come into this very unsettled place of well, if I'm never safe, then and that's where you have to return to faith. And that's why almost everyone that goes through like an awakening eventually turns to a spiritual side of it, a spiritual component, because they have to realize that everything's occurring beyond the body, like beyond the self, that this is not the end all be all. It has to be that there's more, like more intelligent design to what's happening. Otherwise, we're at the whim and whimsy of, terror, basically. So it ends up being like the natural progression to move towards the faith. And then we usually need to have the faith, and then the evidence that our faith is correct will come in. So it's interesting with faith, like, at least in my experience, the faith has to be there first. And then the evidence of the faith being the right path starts to come in. It starts to make more sense. So it can be challenging to embrace faith if you're not a faithful person by nature, because it feels a little unnatural, especially if you're very rational, very logical or analytical. You're constantly looking for reasons to have faith. But yes,
you really need to take a leap of faith with your faith. Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe we can say, you're resting in the I don't know mind as well as resting in your faith.
Totally. Yeah. And I just want to say that I don't know mind, the reason that this relates to divine innocence and non-judgment is because the I don't know presence is approaching each moment as if it's a child experiencing something for the first time, divinely innocent. This brand new experience is here. There's no stories. This is a curious miracle that's approached me. Whether it's having your coffee in the morning or going on a roller coaster or whatever, the same sort of ignorant, like ignorant innocence of a child is being applied. Like you don't know what's going on, but you're excited. And that ends up being sort of the permeating experience, the presiding experience. And so then even when bad things are happening, you know, you may have memories of when you were a kid and like something bad was happening, the adults were getting all upset or something's going on, and you're like, whoa, this is cool. And you, because you don't have a concept of the bad of it.
Yeah, I think we're talking so much about presence being the this innocence, right, in part is just being present to every moment and not, you know, living in the future, living in the past, as the thinking mind tends to do.
And later, if you can help me remember, this comes back to judgment, and I see judgment as sort of two big layers or components. One is like the overt judge. This is the one that judges the self directly and judges others directly. And then there's the covert judgment, which is the more subtle judgment of experience through adherence to narrative. And so we can distinguish between these two as we...
Meaning the stories that we attach to our experiences.
Basically,
as a form of judgment. Yeah.
This experience is good because I have these other experiences.
Yeah.
And I like these other experiences, therefore this one's good. And this type of judgment doesn't seem very harmful. It doesn't seem like a real big problem, right? And it's not when it's not a problem. But eventually it becomes sort of obvious that we want to just sort of let go of those stories, that we don't really need them.
Yes.
And that's sort of the releasing of all judgment. Once that's gone, then your peace can't really be disturbed.
So interesting that you're saying this, because a lot was coming in for me this morning as a download about exactly what you're saying.
Awesome.
So maybe at the end we'll cover that.
Sure.
The next point we have is so we're talking about the practice of cultivating our divine innocence, is cultivating a blanket of grace.
Yes. So you do this really, really, really well. Like, I have to say that I think without meeting you, I would be almost like wise, but cold, like less compassionate, less graceful, less, and so I've really benefited from us coming together and learning grace from you, because honestly, you respond in almost all situations so gracefully. It's very, I could be very jealous almost and envious of your grace. And so it helped expand my idea of how to respond to people and how to respond to myself as well, with grace. So yeah.
Thank you for the lovely feedback.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. When I was in the nadir of my divorce custody situation, the worst moments of my divorce custody situation, and my human wanted to just leave and never see my former spouse again because of stuff we had each done towards each other. We both went a little cuckoo. And I just so wanted to run away from him. I wanted to run away from the pain and all of it. And I kept getting in from my guidance, this is your grace training. This is your grace training. It just over and over. And so that situation where I had to, as I know, anyone in a divorce situation with custody, with kids involved, I had to get bigger. I had to get bigger than the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn compassion and love and selflessness and an orientation of highest and best with my former spouse and, of course, the 3 kids involved. So that's how I developed grace. I don't think I had necessarily that level of grace before then. So that was a real gift of that situation. And I guess the way I would define grace, it's just being loving and being compassionate, no matter what is coming towards you, say from another person. So just recently I had kind of an uncomfortable interaction with a friend, and I felt a little bit hurt, and but I was able to apply grace. I worked through my own hurt, my own pain myself. And then towards her, I just was loving and compassionate. And so and this is not to say that we allow people to treat us in ways that are abusive or traumatizing. And of course, we need to use our discernment there. But in general, healthy relationships with each other and with ourselves, can we work through our pain somewhat on our own and just be unconditionally loving and accepting towards those around us?
Yeah, and
in healthy relationships.
And another aspect of it, I like to use Gandhi as an example, where he's an extreme example, but you can, when you bring peace to confrontation, like true, pure, innocent peace, with no judgment, and just basically you're non-participatory in the conflict itself. So the other who wants to have a conflict can't. Like, they can't draw you into conflict with yourself unless you release your grace. So if you approach any situation, even situations where people are, being abusive, you just basically say, I'm not going to mirror the conflict. I'm going to mirror love and peace. And that doesn't mean that I have to stay and participate either. Like, you can walk away from people in a loving way. Like you're not obligated to sit with them. You're not obligated to listen to their accusations and whatever it is. None of these things are your obligations, unless you choose to. And, like Tassel said, discern sort of, how, is this too much for me to handle? Right. Or am I, is it better for me to just, pick up and leave? A lot of times when we offer just peace and peace, the other person will sort of just run out of steam. There's nothing to, they'll attack character, they'll attack whatever, they'll just start attacking. And to the person who's sitting in grace and peace, it just sort of rolls off because their sense of self is cemented and strong. And so these projections don't land. They just slide off like an oiled duck in the water or something, right? It just slides off. And then the person is just like, well, eventually they'll either realize that they're being so combative and they'll step away and usually apologize and stuff like that. Or, whatever. But the point, I think, is that if you can hold the grace as well, forget about the other person's experience for a minute, just be selfish for a minute. And think about it this way. If you're graceful and peaceful about the confrontation that's happening, you're not perturbed. You're fine. So they are doing whatever they're doing, and it's a like I said earlier, we don't know what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing. They're being however they're being, and that's that's okay.
And we can look at all these situations as teachers, as dojos for our own expansion. Yeah. All that we really need to concern ourselves with is our internal experience. No matter what anyone else is doing, how am I handling it? How am I expanding? Yeah. And if it's okay, I'm just going to give one more example, because grace can also be sort of an ongoing journey in certain situations. Maybe it's not an immediate place you're able to land in. So I'll just give one more example. Again, during my divorce custody situation, a lot of women whom I thought were my friends ended up writing letters against me and my parenting capability for my former spouse. We ended up going to court, and so he had all these letters from women who I thought were my friends, really assassinating my character in a lot of ways that I felt weren't true and were very hurtful to me. And this was one of the most it probably was the most painful aspect of the divorce. What I felt were these betrayals by women whom I trusted.
Not to mention the fear of like, maybe the judge will listen to this, and right. So all of that, right? I can imagine.
The judge really did listen to those letters. Yeah. So it was, so it wasn't just that they had assassinated my character, but the custody of my children was at stake, the most important thing to me in my life. And in fact, I'll just say, because it'll help understand the context of it, that the judge bought into the letters so much that my former spouse's attorney brought up the prospect of him having full custody, of my ex-spouse having full custody. These letters were so damning towards me. So not an easy thing to get over on my part. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And for years, I wrote letters to these women. I felt like I needed to express myself. It sort of, and I didn't send them, but it took me years to work through the feelings of betrayal and anger and
resentment, all that.
And like outrage. And in the end, I did end up sending each one a letter, but it ended up just being, this was what my experience was from the whole thing. It was just about what I experienced, and it felt important for me to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm trying to say is sometimes grace can be a long, ongoing process. And I think you need to feel everything in certain really traumatic situations to get to a place of grace. Mm-hmm. And now at this point, I can say I feel grace towards all of the women, and a lot of them we've reconnected, and I've been able to be very loving with them. Yeah. So, but I think grace can also just be a process.
Oh, totally.
To get there. Yeah.
I'd like to add that on now that you said that. Don't let your focus on embodying grace be another reason to chastise yourself when you don't embody grace. Like, we live in an illusion of separation. So we, the basis of our experience is formed under this idea that we have others that we are entangled with in different conflicts, different whatever. And so part of what we're doing is learning how to handle each conflict gracefully. We're learning how to do that. We may not know how to do that yet. And so we're like you said, it's a process. We tend to graduate and move up into like more challenging situations. And the interesting thing, though, I found is that the situations themselves don't feel as challenging, because what ends up happening is we reach sort of a height of our grace training, like you said, and we go through something totally horrible where people that we thought were our friends totally betray us, or something like this, and we have to learn how to move on from that, forgive that, and be okay with that, have peace with that. And so it's totally a process, and sometimes, like you said, it takes a long time. Sometimes people do it fairly quickly, but later, after this period of grace training starts to resolve, everything that comes in, we've already been through like the crappiest things, right? Yes. The hardest things. And so everything else is a bit of a cakewalk at that point.
Yes, we've learned that lesson. But we may not need more catalyst there.
Right. But when it's not a cakewalk, when it's not easy for us to be graceful, that just means that this is our lesson. Like that's why we're experiencing that, is because we don't know how to be graceful in this situation yet. So we never want to like have a state as our ideal and then chastise ourselves when we don't meet that state. We just have this state as our intention, and like having the intention is proof enough that our heart is golden, that we're working towards improvement. We're trying to be the best self that we can. We don't need to go further and then chastise ourselves for these errors in judgment, or these little tiny blips that we end up making. Also, in the scheme of things, you yelling at your mom because something happened, and, or me getting into a fight with my sister over something. They're, yes, maybe I wasn't graceful in that moment, and it's important that I notice that, but it's not important that I give myself trouble about it. It's really, I just go, okay, I wasn't so graceful. How could I approach it differently next time? And then try to do that consciously next time, if next time comes. And I think actually, because we can visit the past and transmute it, we can essentially learn the lesson, transmute that past experience, and that situation may not even come again, because we've learned the lesson, even though, like, we don't necessarily have to enact the lesson again. We've learned it, and so that energy's out of us. We don't really need that lesson. So always give yourself space for that.
Yes. So I think what you're saying is really, maybe we must start with grace towards ourselves. If
I think so, yeah.
The more grace we have towards ourselves, the more grace we're going to have towards everyone else as well. So it must start with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also want to say, the reason that this is the reason we want to achieve grace is because our true nature is love. So when we are holding resentment, anger, hatred towards others, it doesn't feel right, because it's a bit of an illusion, because we are just love. So grace really benefits us so much.
Yeah.
As well as
grace is our nature, right?
Exactly. We all are grace. We are nothing but grace internally.
So it feels bad when we act out of alignment with that.
Yes.
And that's the only evidence we need to return to it. We don't need to add more to that.
Exactly. And the practice of moving through your own pain without lashing out is such a masterful practice, which just goes hand in hand with the grace training.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next point, we have two more, is to remember our sacred naivety.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this with the childlike innocence, right? Like the ignorance, like, sort of, we talked a little bit about rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Like, it's, this concept can be a little bit freaky for the mind, I think, the rational mind, because it sort of implies to ignore threats, right? Like to realize basically that the threats are your stories. Mm-hmm. And so they're not necessarily real. Now, of course, there's a phrase from, I don't know if it's the Bible or where this is from, but essentially it's, to the one who knows they are the snake, they will pass by as if nothing at all. So the threat or the obstacle, the enemy, will not even perceive there'll be no contest, because so if we're talking about nature doesn't if an animal observes you and you're just a pure peace and presence, they won't think anything of you at all. They won't think of you as a threat, and they won't think of you as, they won't have confusion around what you're going to do. They're much more sensory than we are, and they pick up on the different smells from your emotions and all these other things. But my point is that the threats don't, when you see that the threats aren't real, like that the threats are sort of created, then you don't create any more threats. And so even the things that approach that are not quite ideal, they're not so punchy. Like, for example, if I'm going to get a job, if I'm going to apply for an interview, one of the threats to my safety is that I won't get the job, right? That they won't like me, let's say. And this can feel very life or death. especially if I have a lot of upcoming bills or different things or responsibilities to pay for things. It can feel very immense and like a very deep threat that these people won't like me, which can then make me feel like I need to adjust my beingness. Like I need to put on a certain type of personality, or I need to, impress them in a certain way. And so that our behavior forms around this threat and brings about the experience of managing this threat. But that whole, if you can imagine, if I went into the interview just sort of happy with myself, confident in myself, not sort of entombed in these darker, negative thoughts about how things might go, I'm probably going to be a much better candidate, right, for them. Just my energy, I'm going to be much more confident. I'm going to be more assertive. I'm going to be loving. I'm not going to be combative or conflicting with them. I'm not going to be nervous. There's all these various things that we can say rationally that, oh, that's probably going to provide a more positive experience of the job interview process. And, we form the fears out of the stories, and then we enact them into the world. And depending on how deep that fear is and all that other stuff, we may have so much fear that this person's not going to like me that they truly end up not liking you. Right. And then you don't get the job. And the reason you didn't get the job is because you're so freaked out that they're not going to like you and they're not going to give you the job because you're useless. And if you literally had just the other perspective, it would have went fine. And so
yes. I feel like, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so like we form the fears out of nothingness, right? Out of stories and things that we think we know. Yes. We form a fear and then we act to mitigate the fear. If we don't choose to form the fear at all, and we instead approach it in this naive, like, I'm awesome, this is awesome, let's see what happens, curious, confident approach, this almost naive ignorance of potential dangers, most likely the only things that come in that invade your experience with negativity are more like designed incarnative experience that you are designed to have these random, or not necessarily random, but these surprises, basically, of like, oh, I was sure I was going to get the job and then I didn't. I went in very confident, everything was great, and then I didn't get the job. Like, so I'm not saying you'll always get it if you approach it this way. I'm not saying that anything's for certain ever. And that's part of the realization, is that all I can really do is try to have a peaceful experience now. And in doing that, I set myself up for much less danger to mitigate.
Totally. Peace within, peace without. We are creating our reality. Yes. Except for, as you said, certain pre-incarnative situations that we sort of plan to have happen for our experience.
Ross says there are no mistakes, but there are surprises. Right?
Yeah.
So we can feel very aligned, like everything's going great. A good example is when I went to the airport and missed 2 flights in a row.
Right.
I felt like nothing was going to happen. It was fine. Yeah. I missed a flight and I was like, okay, ouch, but okay. Then I missed the next flight. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Right? Because it didn't feel like this type of thing was going to happen. And so there are no mistakes, but there are surprises. And sometimes the surprises are a little bit difficult.
And they help us expand, ultimately.
But basically, we can look at them as surprises, right? Like, surprise, you didn't get the job. Surprise, right? And then go, what does that mean? Right. What do I do now?
But still living in the energy of trusting life. I feel like part of what we're saying is remembering our sacred naivete.
And that's all naivete is,
it's
right?
Just trust. It's just trusting. Like, children generally, when they're young enough, are very trusting towards life. They haven't
been deceived.
They haven't program themselves with all these negative stories of what could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And a little trick I've been using is if I find myself really worried about something, I ask myself, why? Why are you worried? And usually I'll find some type of limiting belief.
Yes.
And I can just switch it into a positive affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So this sort of like house cleaning of our own consciousness when we
Totally.
find ourselves in a story.
Yeah, we're like sweeping up the corners.
Yeah,
oh, there's
like
some soot over there.
Like, why? Why am I having this worry right now? And we can get to a core limiting belief usually, or
Mm-hmm.
worry, and then we can switch it. Okay, we have one more point on our list, and then I think we had a couple last points to wrap things up. The last point is discernment in challenging situations. So,
right. We talked about this a little bit, but
yeah, when we use the word innocence, the thinking mind might think it's like, it's a pretty complicated world out there. Don't like
people will take advantage of me.
Yeah. Can I really just be innocent all the time? And the way I'm thinking about this, and it's still sort of developing as we talk this out, is we're talking about embodying our innocent self as well as our God self. It's both.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that that's the expansion here of embodying both. So our God self is like, wow, the unconditional love, the infinite wisdom, all the information that comes in from our higher self. I mean, we're God. It's a lot. It's great. And then the innocent self is the more childlike aspect of ourselves. So we're talking about embodying both, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So we always can use our discernment from our higher consciousness in every situation. So
yeah,
that's the way I'm
sure we've all had experiences of being so trusting of someone, like no at all inkling of any real negative situations, and then they turn on us, which you were just talking about, friends turning on us, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I had a similar experience where a guy who was my friend in my computer science class, we would hang out and stuff, went over to his house, we started to hang out, do things. I was 15 or 16. He then set me up to be mugged and robbed. We have these experiences of basically I had heard other people literally in my life had said, I don't think you should be friends with this guy. He's done these things and that type of thing. And I was like, yeah, but he's nice to me. He's a nice dude. I think he's a little misunderstood. That type of thing. That was my orientation. So I was unable to perceive it because I hadn't experienced anything like that before. And I was in my innocence and naive sort of approach. I think what ends up happening is, or what we want to try to do, is take our wisdom, which starts to get honed like a sharpened knife almost, and we sort of inspect with our like scalpel of wisdom the situation, and we basically say, am I trusting? Is my trust in this situation, is it misplaced? Or is
warranted? Yeah.
Is it coming from a need to trust as well? Right? Like, so a lot of times we, for example, we'll pick up a partner that we project our ideal partner onto, and then try to like help them mold into that, right? Because we need this type of partner. And so we start to try and change that. And so if we need a safe situation with this person, we can construct a sort of narrative that explains just how safe it is. And really, we're getting tons of red flags and sort of ignoring them. I think we start to use our wisdom to discern through our experience in the past, while recognizing that, we're not attempting to judge their behavior as right or wrong, really what we're really trying to do to simplify everything is we're trying to be like, is it aligned for me to be in this experience with this person or not? And it's very simple that way. And it's more, checking in sort of with the heart or soul. Sometimes we do feel like we're meant to be stay. And Jamie mentioned this, that she was with an ex, but it didn't feel good. It seemed like it seemed like a big part of her wanted to run away, but she felt called to stay. And so that can happen too. Sometimes there's things we're working out, like contracts between entities that are being resolved. And so stuff, sometimes we feel pulled to leave, but also we feel like we have to stay. But like you said, we're using, I think, the wisdom of the God self, with the love of the innocence of the child, and sort of presuming all is well, but noticing like this person routinely is pushing my boundaries and trying to, elicit conflict or bring my vibration down. You can have friends that they see you up here and they pull at you to come down to their level, things like that as well. And really, we've talked about this before a little bit, I think, this is what I think the planning your lessons becomes. So basically, you can look at it like, this person's continually doing this type of behavior. I'm not judging them for it, but now I get to choose. Am I going to participate in this? Am I going to try to help them see that this behavior doesn't feel very aligned with me? Or, and is this something I can help them with? Is this something they need my help with? Is this something that's my responsibility to assist them with? Have I learned what I need to learn here? Ask these questions, and if you've learned what you need to learn, and all this person's sort of doing is bringing you, a bit of nonsense, then maybe you can let go of that lesson, right? Maybe there's nothing for you to explore there for your consciousness, and you can't. We're not responsible for how other people are behaving, more or less. We're not. We tend to want to fix others, but we can't. They can adjust themselves or not. All we can do is hold space for them, and if they ask us, we can offer insights. But most of the time, these types of situations, maybe it's an opportunity for you to establish boundaries better.
Yes.
But maybe you've already done that and it's not working.
Yep.
And maybe that person is always going to ignore your boundaries, and maybe you just don't need to participate. And so just sort of approaching it, discerning for yourself, like, we don't want people to stay in abusive relationships or stay in relationships with friends, whatever, or situations that feel horrible just because they're like, oh, but I'm peaceful and graceful. That's not at all what we're saying. And everyone has their own balance and discernment as to what they're willing to participate in and what they're not. And honoring that, I think, is important.
Yes. And I think a theme here that we're also talking about is, it almost sounds impossible, but to be wise and innocent at the same time. And as we go through life and we have certain initiations and heartbreaks and devastations, sometimes we can default to like a jaded aspect, like, oh, this is just awful and life has been so hard and I can't trust life. It's just too terrifying and traumatic.
Yeah.
And I would say what's happening there is we're getting stuck in feeling and not fully feeling the pain.
Mm-hmm.
I think a jadedness or resentment is just a stagnancy. It's we haven't gone deep enough into the pain. We're in anger.
Yeah.
We're not really feeling the hurt. So I think we can always move out of that. And so I think it's absolutely possible. And I think this is really the foundation of what we're talking about, of our divine innocence, is coming back to our innocence, coming back to who we really are, which is love and faith, no matter what we have experienced on the external, and understanding that everything we experienced was part of our soul's plan and served us in some way.
Yeah.
And just landing in this place of, I'm wise and I'm innocent too. And there's such a purity there.
And there's another way that we can review some of these situations and I'll just continue using that example of the person that's pushing your boundaries, or maybe, trying to bring your vibe down. You can consider, why do I even have these boundaries? Why does this behavior even bother me at all? Right? Why, right? Is there perhaps opportunity for me to just love this person as they are, even though they're a little abrasive and they're a little pushy and they're a little, that's who they are. And I love this person, right? They're my friend. I've been friends with them for 20 years and they've always sort of been this way. Do I accept this about them or not? Right?
It's such an interesting experience.
It's opportunity to love people.
Yeah, an opportunity to grow your grace.
Despite the characteristics they're inhabiting that don't resonate for you, they're not aligned with your nature.
Yes.
But they're perfect as they are.
Yes. And you and I have talked about this, sort of the development that we often go through. Let's say there's an example for me. There's a very close family member for me who sometimes has been very insulting and very challenging towards me. And earlier on in my life, I would just cut off communication with this person. And that was sort of an important part of my development to realize, oh, I don't like what's happening, and I'm empowered enough to set my boundaries. I don't have
embracing
to deal
sovereignty
with that.
and
yes, I was embracing my sovereignty and setting boundaries. And then more recently, and you helped me a lot with this same person was continuing some of this behavior, but I stayed with the person. I did not cut the person off. And even with some of the insulting, lashing out towards me, I was able to hold it. I felt my own pain, but I was still able to continue to be in communication and give love. And I see that as a bit of an expansion. And wherever you fall on that is perfect.
Right.
You don't have to rush anything. But this can be an expansion.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very important that you said that. There's sort of progress stages, I'd say. At first, we accept everything because we feel disempowered. Then we become empowered. We become empowered. We set more strict boundaries, and we might be really vocal, even like to a part where, like, looking back at yourself, you're like, I was a little bit intense there, like
too much, right?
Maybe a little too much, right? Like maybe I was a little too strict with people. At least that's how I was. And then we go beyond that and be like, why do I even feel the only reason that their words upset me is because I believe them a little bit.
Yeah, so letting them, and it becomes like training. Like, can I hear these really harsh words, and can I be okay with it? And
is this a lesson I want to participate in?
Yeah, and sometimes you might not want to.
And you don't. Yeah, exactly.
Your choice.
It's
There's
your choice.
No rush. We're eternal beings. There's no rush. You do not have to make it happen this lifetime.
Yeah.
Should we just wrap up with, I think you had a point about stories and I had a point too, and maybe we'll wrap up with that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that judgment is primarily noticed in all these layers, in different layers. And the first layer we tend to notice is the overt judge that's within us, the very like outward obvious judgment where we're like, this person's ugly, this person is stupid, or I'm stupid, or, you know, either way, right? It's very, and it can be positive as well. So I'm attractive, that person's not attractive, that person is attractive. This is the judge, right? The judge that exists within us. this judge is, to some degree, important to us because it helps us discern what aligns with us and what doesn't. But what the issue becomes is that we have these positive and negative stories attached to these various terms that we end up using and labeling people with. So the first step to, I think, one of the first steps to getting rid of judgment is to notice when we're doing this, when we're saying, often we'll just see someone walk in front of our car and we'll immediately judge them, and try to be aware of this. Like, they may be wearing ridiculous shorts or something. It could be so dumb. And we're just like, look at those people, that person's shorts. Like, we're not speaking this out loud. We're not yelling at them about their shorts. It's literally just our internal monologue. That's like, that person's shorts look ridiculous. That person is clearly, like, maybe they're crazy, or maybe they're, like, we start to create this little narrative sometimes. Some people do this more than other people. Some people don't do this really that much. It sort of just depends. But when we can notice that we're doing that, we can just say, that's not for me. I'm not interested in judging these people. We do that as well to ourselves. Whenever we're overtly judgmental about ourselves, we just remind ourselves that that's not the state that we want to be in. Most important is that we just pay a close attention to like a honed sort of awareness and presence in what is arising in me. If judgment's arising in me, just notice that it's judgment, and then realize I don't really want to judge people anymore. That doesn't really align with how I am moving to be. So I'll let go of that. And as you continually do that, the mind just starts to realize, oh, we don't do that. That's not what we do. So the opportunities for judgment just stop coming in because it's not something we do. But at first, like, they'll come in more and more, and then it will dwindle away. But then after you get through that, there's a more subtle layer of covert judgment. This is the judgment of the experience itself that is, disguised. It's not apparent to us that we are the experience, right? So when we judge the experience, when we judge the moment, saying the moment is not good enough, what we're truly saying is, I'm not good enough because I am the moment. And so we're saying, God, you're not good enough. I'm not good enough. The moment's not good enough. Life isn't good enough. Everything is shit. And we're basically saying that in that little tiny just moment of, I can't wait until I go to the water park tomorrow because I'm bored right now and the water park's going to be fun. That's a better experience. I can't wait for that experience. It's better than this one. Even those subtle judgments are saying, God sucks right now. Tomorrow he'll be better because we'll be at the water park, or he or she, whatever we frame it. And we don't realize the nuance of this internal dialogue that we have and just how particular and subtle it is with how we talk about our experience to ourselves, how we frame everything that we ever encounter.
Yes.
We don't realize.
And even the words that we use to talk about our experiences. This is what I was thinking about a lot this morning. For instance, the word divorced, mm-hmm. or the phrase long distance relationship. So these are words that sometimes I use about my life.
Yeah, there are concepts, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a lot of associations with them, mm-hmm. that may not actually apply to my particular situation. So when I hear the word divorced, I have sort of a negative immediate response to that. I think there are in our culture, a lot of negative associations with that word.
Right.
And the truth for me is my post-divorce experience has been really pretty great. And so between you and me, sometimes I've used this phrase, oh, we're in a long distance relationship. And every time I say that, it doesn't feel good.
I was going to say, that concept of it, the long distance relationship, sounds bad. But
yeah,
the truth of it, I would say personally, is that I've never been more connected in a relationship. I've never felt closer in a relationship with anyone else. So even though there's a physical distance, and there is a story around what a long distance relationship is and the problems with it, the truth of the matter for me is that I've never felt more connected with a relationship that I've been in. So perhaps the long distance focal point of it doesn't have to be so like, rigid,
like putting it in a box. These words we use can put our experiences into boxes, and it can negatively frame them. And so I just like this idea of just like sticking with the facts.
Yeah.
What are the actual facts without labeling, labels that have like really multi-layered associations. A lot of these, not every word does, but so yeah, just again, sort of dropping the stories, dropping the labels, being in the present moment of what I'm actually experiencing, I think are all really great practices.
Yeah, totally. Like if we're not so for example, if we're not saying that our long distance relationship is a problem, then we're basically saying, instead, I'm focusing on the positive things and all the good things about our relationship, which, yes, there are things that are not quite ideal the way that they are, and we have intentions for those to shift. But we don't need to look so much at those things. We can trust that that's okay. It's okay how it is. And and our intentions is really where we, my intention is to do this, and my intention is to perceive the love in the moment, not perceive the lack of close and physicality.
And as we are creating our reality, as within, so without, the more, just in this specific example, we focus on what's so great, the more that is going to come into our external reality as well. Exactly.
So, yeah. Jamie said, I never liked people-y labels anyway. I really like that the way she said that. I don't like people. She doesn't even like people-y words, really. She's making up her own. I do that all the time.
I love making up words.
I think it's like I was saying, it's a sort of a covert way of us judging is by, a long distance relationship has a story to it. It has a concept, a framework in us that is generally perceived as problematic. And all the stories through media and friends and whatever have said this is not a good situation to be in. And so it's easy for us to, in this type of situation, be like, oh, this is not quite good. Or very easy for us to be like, it could be better. When I think when we're doing that, we're kind of ignoring just how good it is, I think we're not seeing just how good it is. And
even as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, like you said, this has been the most amazing relationship of my life, and it sometimes happens across a distance. Isn't that amazing? I just, for the first time, I'm really thinking like our relationship is even more amazing.
Close despite the distance.
Yes, wow. We really got something here, baby.
So imagine what we'll be able to do when the distance starts to go away, or when,
so it's more like we could focus on celebrating what it is rather than focusing on something that feels more negative.
And that's every moment's like that. Every single moment is like, am I going to celebrate the moment, or am I going to reject it and push at life?
Yes.
And and there's always something to celebrate in the moment.
There's always something to celebrate.
Even in the worst moments.
And I think that's part of the innocence.
Right. Yeah. The worst moments aren't even perceived as bad because you're so
attention so much to what you might think is negative. Yeah.
Exactly. There was a lot of chat, and we had a lot to cover. I think in this episode we went an hour and 20 minutes, so we went a bit over. So I'm sorry for not getting into the chat too much. There was a bunch of comments. We do read it all. Usually we'll go back and read it after. So I just wanted to say that we appreciate you guys being here, watching and chatting. We really do like it. Approve of it all. We love it. And when we can, we'll bring it into the show and stuff like that. But in this case, we just had a whole bunch of stuff I think we were trying to say. So We can't talk all day long.
Well, we can.
We can.
We won't burden you with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and just to recap what we said in the beginning, what we talked about today and what we're going to talk about on Friday are some of the foundational pieces of a course we're holding for our Patreon community next week. If you're interested in joining us with the course, it's very reasonable to join Patreon. I think at the level to get the course, it's $30 a month.
Yeah.
And there's a link down below in the description. We'd love to have you.
And this course, I'd like to say, is our own method that we've formed out of, we're not parroting another method. We're creating from scratch sort of our own communication method based on our experience with our relationship, Tassel's training as a doctor of psychotherapy, and then my sort of spiritual experiences and seeking and stuff like that as a wizard, basically applying all of that and then trying to put that into a bit of a framework that people can follow with their partners. But also the reason we call it universal is because the communication method is meant to be universally applicable to all relationships, or even with strangers. So
yes, even institutions, even countries, right. It's
exactly.
It's so powerful.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of it has been channeled through us as well.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesomeness. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
So much love.